The sirens were close enough to rattle my chest, but the gate wouldn't move. Red lights from the ambulance bounced across the wet pavement, flashing over my truck, over my hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. My baby's cries had stopped 5 minutes ago, and that silence was worse than anything I'd ever heard on a battlefield. "Come on! Open the damn gate!" I shouted into the intercom. Static hissed, then her voice, slow, smug, too calm for what was happening. "Jack, you know the rules," Denise said. "After-hours access has to be authorized by the HOA. My daughter's not breathing." I slammed the button again. "Open it! System's on lockdown. I can't override it without board approval." I looked through the metal bars. She was standing there, raincoat zipped, clipboard under her arm, like she'd been waiting for me. The flashing lights painted her face red and blue, but she didn't flinch. The paramedic ran to me. "Sir, we need through now. Every second—" "I know," I said, staring at her. "Denise, open it." She folded her arms. "You've been warned about keeping construction equipment on the property line, Jack. Maybe next time you'll follow the rules." I felt the world tilt. The paramedic cursed and ran back to the ambulance, trying to radio dispatch for a detour, but the other entrance was a half-mile of locked fencing. There wasn't time. I saw my wife in the back seat, pale and shaking, our baby limp in her arms. The sound that came out of her wasn't human. It was pure terror. Denise still didn't move. That was it. I jumped out of my truck and sprinted toward the yellow bulldozer parked near the cul-de-sac. I'd been using it for a drainage job that day. My boots slapped through puddles. The smell of diesel hit before I even climbed inside. The paramedics were yelling, my wife screaming something I couldn't hear over the rain. I started the engine. The gate loomed ahead, black iron, 10 feet tall, spotless, expensive. The HOA's pride. I shoved the throttle forward and felt the roar shake the air. Denise's eyes went wide. The first hit sounded like thunder. The metal bent, then groaned, then snapped. The second hit took it down. The bulldozer rolled through like it was nothing. The ambulance followed instantly, sirens blaring, mud splashing against its tires as it tore past me and up the street toward my house. Denise stood frozen by the remains of her perfect gate, rain plastering her hair to her face. Her clipboard lay in the mud, papers soaked and curling. When I climbed out, she pointed at me with a trembling hand. "You just committed property destruction," she said, voice shaking but still full of that same false authority. "You'll regret this." I stared back at her, chest heaving. "If my daughter dies because of you, I'll regret not doing it sooner." Police lights flared down the road, blue and white this time. The paramedics were already inside the house. I leaned against the dozer, mud on my jeans, rain dripping off my nose, watching Denise try to explain herself to the officers who were already questioning why an ambulance had to ram its way into a secure community. You ever see someone so obsessed with control that they forget what control is for? What would you do if your neighbor's rules cost you the minutes that could take your child's life? Hit subscribe, because this isn't the worst thing she did. Let me back up and tell you how this started. I moved into Maple Ridge Estates 3 years ago, thinking it would be quiet, safe even, the kind of place where my wife could take our newborn for walks under the oak trees and not think about alarms or locks. After years in the Army, I wanted peace. I built houses for a living now, mostly foundations and drainage systems, things meant to last. Back then, the HOA seemed harmless, strict, sure, but fair enough. Denise Caldwell was already president, known for her attention to detail, the kind of woman who measured grass with a ruler. She smiled a lot, but it never reached her eyes. The first time we met, she was standing on my porch the morning after we moved in, clipboard ready. "Welcome to Maple Ridge," she'd said, scanning my yard like a soldier taking inventory. Just a few notes about compliance. That was the first warning. I just didn't know it yet. The next time Denise showed up, it was on a Tuesday morning, right when I was finishing a big job down the road. I was covered in dirt, tools still scattered in the back of my truck, trying to get some air before heading back into the house. The last thing I expected was to hear that same familiar rattle of the clipboard before she showed up on my driveway, looking as smug as ever. "You've got a problem, Jack," she said, without even bothering to say hello. She was standing by the front gate, hands on her hips, waiting for me to acknowledge her. I wiped the sweat off my forehead, confused. "Problem? Your trash cans. They're too visible." The guidelines state they need to be kept out of sight unless they're within the garage or hidden behind something. I stared at her for a long second, blinking. She was serious. The trash cans. Those same cans that had been sitting in the exact same spot since we moved in. Nothing had changed. Nothing had been out of line. The trash cans? Seriously? I asked, still incredulous. Rules are rules, she said, raising an eyebrow. And you've already been warned about your work truck being parked in front of your driveway. I'm not hiding my truck, Denise. I need it for work. You could have it parked in your garage if you weren't using it for those, construction jobs? She gestured to my tools. Not to mention, we don't appreciate the noise after 6 p.m. Her voice was sweet, but there was an edge there, like the taste of vinegar. I tried to keep my cool. You've got to be kidding me. The noise? It's 9:30 in the morning. I pointed to the empty street, then the houses around us. This is a suburban neighborhood, not a retirement community. People are at work or school and that's why you need to respect the peace. She cut me off, her eyes narrowing. Do you want to get cited again? My jaw clenched. I wanted to shout, to ask her if she had any concept of reality, but I knew how these things went. I'd already had 2 fines in the last month, each for petty nonsense. This was getting ridiculous. I glanced over my shoulder, hoping for some relief. That's when I saw him. Ryan Holt was standing by his mailbox across the street, looking over at us. He didn't seem to be moving anytime soon, like he was caught in the middle of something he didn't want to deal with. Ryan was the firefighter who lived 2 houses down, the one who'd tried to help me when I first moved in. He'd offered advice on building codes and even helped me fix the leaky pipe in my garage when I'd first moved here. We'd had a few beers together and talked about life, but the guy was also a member of the HOA. I knew he was always stuck in the middle. I gave him a quick wave, but he didn't wave back. He just looked at me for a moment before turning away, heading back toward his house. He wasn't stupid. He could see what was going on, how Denise was harassing me, and he didn't want to get caught in it. Denise, still watching me closely, gave a little smirk. I suggest you clean that up before it gets worse, Jack. With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, the sound of her heels clacking like a clock counting down to something worse. I stared after her, my chest tight. It wasn't just her. It was the whole HOA, always on the prowl, always waiting for an excuse to flex their control. And Ryan. I wasn't sure where he stood anymore. The guy had been a solid neighbor, but I could tell the pressure was getting to him. Later that afternoon, I saw him outside again, just pulling his car into the driveway. I stood by the window for a moment, thinking about it. I couldn't get the image of him looking away out of my head. I knew he'd seen what was happening, but he hadn't stepped up. I grabbed my jacket and headed outside. It was a perfect opportunity. "Hey, Ryan!" I called, walking across the street toward him. He froze, one hand still on the door handle of his car. I tried to keep my voice casual. "Got a minute?" "Yeah," he said, looking down for a second, then back up. He shifted uncomfortably, like he wasn't sure whether to stay or run. "What's up?" "Denise," I said, glancing over my shoulder to make sure she wasn't lurking. "She's getting worse. You saw her this morning, right?" Ryan didn't answer at first. He shifted again, taking a deep breath. "She's just doing her job, man." "Come on," I said, the frustration creeping into my voice. "You're one of us, Ryan. You know how ridiculous this is?" He bit his lip and looked away. "Look, I know, but if I stick my neck out too much, I'm going to get caught in the middle. The board's already been after me about a few things. They're not easy to fight." He shrugged. "You get what I mean?" I could see it, the hesitation in his eyes. He wasn't as sure about this as he wanted me to think. I took a step closer. "Ryan, if this keeps going, people are going to get hurt. It's not just me, it's everyone. And if you don't say something, you're complicit." He winced, but before he could respond, I turned and walked back to my house, leaving him standing there with that look of conflict plastered on his face. I wasn't sure if he'd act, but I knew one thing. If I was going to take this fight any further, I couldn't do it alone. I left Ryan in his driveway, rain soaking my collar. The clubhouse that night felt like the next round of an argument I didn't want. When I pushed through the door, fluorescent lights hummed and stale coffee stung the air. Denise sat at the head table, clipboard like an accusation. She smiled without warmth. "Welcome," she said. "Tonight, safety, landscaping, compliance." Denise spoke first. We've had unauthorized entries. We need tighter gate protocol to protect the community. A hand called for cameras. Denise nodded. Fines for repeat offenders, she added. I thought of the ambulance. I thought of my baby. The words stuck in my throat. Denise turned slightly and addressed the room, voice sweet but sharp. And we all recall Mr. Mercer's recent incident. Property destruction is not how we resolve disputes here. Community harmony matters. Her gaze cut to me, cool and deliberate. Gasps and half applause fluttered like a net. Someone murmured about responsibility. A woman near the back tutted. I felt every head in the room like the glare of a searchlight. The humiliation bruised, a small prickle behind the eyes, because the story they heard was tidy. A man who bulldozed a gate. They didn't hear about a baby, about the ambulance, about the seconds. They heard a headline and it fit the narrative Denise wanted. Ryan stood, slow and deliberate. We should formalize emergency access, he said, eyes on the floor. He kept his fingers twisting the hem of his jacket. The small physical movements, thumb rubbing a scar, a foot tapping once, showed his conflict more than any speech. Denise's smile didn't waver. Legal counsel advises regulated access, she said. We can't allow bypasses. A woman near the front whispered to her neighbor. I caught the fragment like a radio glitch. Keep access locked to prevent outsiders, even ambulances if they're unauthorized. The sentence hit like cold metal. Ryan's face lost color. He rubbed his jaw and absently toyed with his keys. The hesitation was visible, his jaw tightening, his fingers worrying at a ring. He looked like a man carrying a heavy secret. Denise folded her hands. We'll review policy with counsel, she said. Any other comments? Silence followed. The fluorescent hum seemed louder. No one wanted to be the person who spoke next. After the meeting, I found Ryan by his truck, shoulders hunched. He avoided my eyes. You heard her, I said, about access. If I push, he said quietly, they'll remove me from the committee. They'll make an example. He ran a hand through wet hair. I can't risk that. You run into burning buildings, I said. If the board is willing to block help over protocol, this is bigger than committee politics. He closed his eyes, then opened them. His hands trembled slightly. He fiddled with his keychain until it clicked. I saw her at the gate that night, he admitted. I saw her toggle the override. I didn't want to believe she'd leave it. The confession landed between us heavy as a slab. He pressed his thumb into the seam of his palm as if steadying himself. The hesitation was physical. Jaw clench, fingers twisting, gaze flicking away. We need proof, he said. If I say it and they call me a liar, they ruin me. Then help me get it, I said. Not words, footage, logs, something that shows she did it. I'll try, he said. I saw fear wrestling with duty in his eyes. For the first time since the gate, there was a small, real hint of an ally. Proof would risk everything, but it might finally give the truth a voice. He walked away with the tremor still in his hands, but his chin was set a fraction firmer. The clubhouse door clicked shut behind him like a verdict. The rain hadn't let up for days, and it seemed like the whole neighborhood was buried under a low, gray fog. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the paperwork from the last HOA meeting. The words blurred together. Fines, compliance, security regulations. The more I read, the more I saw it. Denise was building her own little kingdom here, using the HOA's rules to choke every bit of life out of this place. I opened the gate logs again, still trying to make sense of what had happened that night. The timestamps didn't add up. The gate had malfunctioned earlier that evening. I remembered hearing the grinding noise when I tried to pull through, but when I looked at the log, it showed no irregularities. Everything was marked as on time, smooth and perfect, too perfect. I felt the anger rise, a sharp pressure behind my eyes. Denise had to be involved. There was no other explanation. I'd been here too long to believe in coincidences. I grabbed my phone and texted Ryan. Jack, hey, I need more from those logs. Something's off. Can you check for me? The reply came fast, almost like he'd been waiting. Ryan, already on it. Give me a few hours. I sat back, staring at the screen, my fingers tapping against the table. Ryan might have been reluctant to step up, but he was getting there. I could feel it. His hesitation was real, but there was a crack forming in his loyalty to the board. The next piece of the puzzle was just out of reach, and I had to push him. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. "Ryan, I found something." Denise accessed the gate system twice that night. The override was manually triggered, both times, but the logs don't show it. They were erased. My stomach dropped. It was exactly what I'd feared. Denise had wiped the evidence clean. I ran my hand through my hair, frustration building. This was bigger than just some petty neighborhood politics. This was about people's lives, and Denise didn't care about the consequences. She only cared about control. I paced around the kitchen, trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't just let this slide. If I was going to expose her, I needed proof, something concrete. That's when I thought of it. The security footage from the gatehouse. There was a camera directly above the terminal, and if the footage hadn't been erased, it would show Denise herself, standing there, punching in the code. I pulled on my jacket and headed for the gatehouse. It was a 15-minute walk through the rain-soaked streets, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I had to see it with my own eyes. The gatehouse was dark when I arrived, the small window reflecting the dim light of the street lamp above. I peered inside, but the blinds were drawn. There was no one there. Good. I didn't want to deal with a witness right now. I knocked twice, lightly, trying to stay under the radar. I waited a few moments before slipping inside. The gatehouse was small, just a desk with a few monitors and a drawer full of forms. The old computer screen glowed softly in the corner, the cursor blinking in a way that made it feel like the room itself was alive. I quickly logged into the security system using my credentials. The HOA was obsessed with security, and everyone had a code, including me. I clicked through a few folders until I found what I was looking for, the footage from the night the ambulance had arrived. I hit play. For the next few minutes, I sat in silence, watching the grainy footage unfold. It was almost like a dream. The black and white feed, the sounds of the rain against the windows, the slow movements of the paramedics pulling equipment from the back of the truck. Then, at exactly 9:14 p.m., I saw it. Denise walked into the frame, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete floor. She walked up to the control panel with that same smug expression I'd seen on her face so many times. She paused, checking her watch, then punched in the code to override the system. The moment she did, the gate's lights flickered and the entry logs updated, but the footage showed nothing but a blinking cursor. The logs were wiped clean, but the footage didn't lie. I leaned back in the chair, my pulse racing. This was it. This was the proof I needed. I grabbed my phone and texted Ryan immediately. "Jack, it's all here. Denise is on the footage. She erased the logs, but she can't hide from this." Ryan. Holy shit. I smiled to myself. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I might actually have a chance to bring this to an end, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. The next step was going to be a fight I wasn't ready to back down from. The rain was finally letting up by the time I pulled into Ryan's driveway, but the air still felt thick, like everything was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Ryan's truck was parked out front. The headlights dimmed as I approached the porch. I could feel the tension in the way he hadn't texted back yet, even after I sent the footage. His silence spoke louder than any words could. I knocked twice, my fist solid against the door, and waited. Ryan opened it quickly, but his eyes weren't looking at me. They were on the ground, his hand resting on the doorframe, like he was trying to keep himself grounded. "You got it?" he asked, voice low. "Yeah," I said, stepping inside. "It's all there. Denise is on the footage. She's the one who triggered the override." Ryan nodded slowly, running a hand through his wet hair. "I saw it," he said, eyes still averted. "God, I saw it." I watched him closely. The guilt was written all over his face. This wasn't just about the HOA's power anymore. This was personal for him, too. There was something in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or fear. He wasn't sure what to do with the truth now that it was out in the open. "I know you saw it," I said, taking a step closer, "and I know you're scared of what happens next, but we can't just let this slide." Ryan took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting at his sides. "Jack, it's not that simple. You don't get it. The board is powerful. They'll destroy me. They'll bury this whole thing. If I push any harder, I'll lose everything." I looked at him hard. "What do you mean, lose everything? You've got a career, you've got a family. What's more important to you, Ryan? Protecting them or protecting some corrupt system?" Ryan's gaze flicked to the window, like he was hoping the answer would be out there in the rain. "I didn't sign up for this," he muttered. "I didn't know it was going to get like this. I just wanted to be part of the community, man. I wanted to help." I shook my head. Helping people isn't about sitting on the sidelines while they get crushed. You're in this, Ryan, whether you like it or not. If we let her get away with this, it's only going to get worse. Ryan stared at the floor, lost in thought. I could see him weighing his options. The safe route, the quiet route, the route that kept his job intact, or the truth, which would tear everything apart. "You're right," he finally said, his voice low. "But I'm scared. I don't know if I can do this." "You don't have to do it alone," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not backing down. And I'm asking you not to either. This is about more than just you and me. It's about the people who live here, people who are being silenced by Denise's bullshit." Ryan nodded, his jaw clenched tight. "All right," he said, almost in a whisper. "I'll help. I'll give you everything I can." I clapped him on the back, relief flooding me. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. But I knew the next step wasn't going to be easy. We were both walking a razor's edge. There was no going back once we decided to expose Denise for what she was. "We need to act fast," I said. "She's already covering her tracks. The longer we wait, the more she'll destroy." Ryan nodded again, the weight of his decision settling in. "I'll get you everything I can from the security logs," he said, voice steady now, "and I'll talk to a few people I know. They won't go public, but they can help us get the right evidence." "Good," I said, feeling the fire in my chest reignite. "We'll take it from there." But as I turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that Denise knew exactly what was happening. I had no proof yet, but the way she'd manipulated everything up to this point made it clear she wouldn't let us get away with exposing her so easily. We were entering the danger zone, and from here on out, it was only going to get uglier. The first warning came in the form of a letter. It was folded neatly in a manila envelope, the kind Denise used to send official HOA notices. I hadn't even bothered to open it at first. I'd been digging through the paperwork, going over the security footage again, trying to find the final piece of the puzzle. But then I saw it, my name printed in bold letters across the front, the HOA logo stamped like a seal of doom. When I ripped it open, the words jumped off the page. Final notice. Failure to comply. Fines will be assessed immediately if all conditions are not met within 48 hours. I read it twice, my pulse starting to race. The notice was about my work truck again, but this time they'd upped the stakes. It wasn't just a warning anymore. They were threatening to tow it, the truck that was the lifeblood of my business. Without it, I wouldn't be able to feed my family. I grabbed my jacket and stormed out the door, my fist clenched around the letter. I didn't even bother to lock up. I was too furious, too close to the edge. I walked across the street to Ryan's house, the letter still gripped tightly in my hand. He was sitting on his porch, staring at his phone. He didn't even look up when I approached, but I didn't care. The anger was bubbling over now. It didn't matter if he was ready to fight or not. This was happening. "Ryan!" I yelled, my voice sharp with frustration. "You've got to see this." Ryan slowly raised his eyes to meet mine, taking in my clenched fists, the way I was practically vibrating with rage. He didn't say anything, just stood up and walked toward me. I handed him the letter. He took it without a word and read it, his face darkening with every line. "They're escalating," he muttered, handing it back to me. "This isn't just about the truck. They're trying to push you out." I nodded, the frustration boiling inside me. This is what she does. She doesn't care who she hurts, as long as she gets what she wants. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, looking more conflicted than I'd ever seen him. "I don't know if I can do this, Jack. I want to help, but—" "Help?" I interrupted, my voice louder than I meant. "We're not just helping, we're fighting for what's right. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about every single person she's ever hurt, and there are a lot of them. We can't just let her keep running things like this." Ryan looked down at his shoes, his fingers playing with the keys in his pocket. "I know, but every time I push back, it gets worse. You've seen it. It's like she's got eyes everywhere, and if I keep helping you—" "You think she's not already watching you?" I shot back, stepping closer. "You think she hasn't already made you a target? Look at what she's doing to us. You want to let her win?" Ryan flinched, his shoulders dropping. He took a deep breath, like he was trying to steady himself. I don't know what to do anymore, man. I don't know how far I'm willing to go. I stepped back, trying to keep my voice level. I don't care how far we have to go. I'm not stopping. And you can either stand with me or you can let her keep destroying everything we care about. It's your choice. Ryan's eyes were a mix of fear and something else, something like guilt. He looked down at the ground for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I'll help you, he said quietly. I just don't know what it's going to cost. The moment felt like it stretched on forever. I could see how much this was tearing him up, but I couldn't back down now, not when we were so close. Before I could say anything else, a flash of headlights cut through the darkness. Ryan tensed, his hand instinctively going to the side of his truck like he was expecting trouble. I turned to look, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the familiar black SUV pull up to the curb. It was Denise. She stepped out slowly, a tight smile on her face, clipboard clutched in one hand. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but her hair was still perfectly in place, every strand combed meticulously. "Jack!" she called out, her voice smooth, almost friendly. "I thought I'd catch you before you left. For work, I have a few more concerns I'd like to address." I clenched my jaw. There was no way this conversation was going to end well. She didn't even look at Ryan. "Your truck," she continued as if she hadn't just sent me a threat, "is still in violation of HOA policy. I'm afraid we'll have to issue a formal fine, unless you decide to relocate it." I took a deep breath, my hands curling into fists at my sides. "I'm not moving it." Denise's smile didn't falter. "Then I'll be forced to escalate. The board will be making the final decision at the next meeting. I'll make sure to have the proper authorities notified." Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me, clearly caught in the middle. Denise turned her icy gaze on him, finally acknowledging his presence. "Oh, and Ryan, I trust you'll be taking care of this, won't you?" His face went pale, and he opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "I'm done," I said. "We're done." I turned away and walked back to my house without looking back, my fists still clenched. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next few days felt like a storm building on the horizon. Every time I checked my phone, there was another notice from the HOA. More fines, more demands. The weight of it all was suffocating. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep. Every inch of my house felt like it was closing in on me. But then, just when I was about to hit my breaking point, I got a text from Ryan. "Ryan, I have something. Meet me at the old warehouse at 9 p.m. No explanation, no details. Just the message that made my heart race. I knew it was time. Ryan had finally made his move. I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside. The night air was cold, the streets damp from the recent rain. The warehouse was about a mile away, down a narrow road lined with darkened houses, the kind that never seemed to change. I kept my pace quick, my mind racing. What had Ryan uncovered? What was he going to show me? When I arrived, I saw him standing at the entrance, a silhouette in the dim light of the warehouse's flickering street lamp. He looked different tonight, more confident, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "Hey," I said, walking up to him. Ryan looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something resembling determination in them. "I got you something," he said, pulling a thick folder from his bag. He handed it to me without hesitation. I flipped it open. The first thing that hit me was a stack of documents. Board meeting minutes, email chains, logs, the kind of stuff I had only dreamt about getting my hands on. But there was one thing that stood out above all the rest, an email thread dated just a week before the ambulance incident. The subject line read, "Gate override, emergency access denial." I stared at it for a long moment, the weight of the evidence settling over me like a fog. The emails were damning. Denise had been in direct communication with the security company, instructing them to deny emergency access for specific residents, including me. She had orchestrated the entire situation, manipulating the gate's access and covering it up by erasing the logs. Ryan watched me closely, his face tense. "I didn't know how far it went, Jack. I didn't want to believe it. But I got into the security company's system. They've been working with her. She's been using them to lock people out when it suits her." I could feel the blood drain from my face as I pieced it together. This wasn't just about control over property rules anymore. This was about lives, my daughter's life. And Denise had known exactly what she was doing when she blocked the ambulance. Ryan continued, his voice quieter now. like he was trying to make sense of the chaos. I got these emails, the logs, everything. She knew. She wanted to punish you. She didn't care if your daughter died that night. She didn't care about any of us. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat rise in my chest. This was it. The smoking gun. I could take this to the police, the media, or even the board. If I could expose this, it was game over for her. But Ryan wasn't finished. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. But here's the thing. The board, they're in on it too. Most of them. I went through their personal communications. They've been funneling HOA fines into personal accounts, using the compliance fees to cover their own backs. I froze. What? Ryan nodded grimly. It's all in here. This isn't just about Denise. It's bigger. The entire board is involved in a financial scheme. They're laundering money through the HOA's fines and fees. They've been taking advantage of homeowners for years, Jack. It's all in those files. The weight of it hit me like a freight train. Denise wasn't just some petty HOA tyrant. She was the head of a criminal operation, using her position to extort and manipulate every person in this neighborhood. I looked at Ryan, my mind racing. What do we do with this? Ryan was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the darkness. We take it to the cops. We expose it. But Jack, if we go public with this, it's going to get ugly. The board will retaliate. Denise will make sure we're both buried in legal battles. There's no going back once we step into that ring. I nodded slowly. I'm ready. It's time to take her down. Ryan handed me the folder one last time, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of resolve and caution. We're not doing this alone, he said. I've already talked to a few neighbors. They'll back us up. We've got a community behind us. The weight of those words settled in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. The people Denise had silenced, the families she'd manipulated. And with the truth in my hands, I wasn't going to back down. We'll expose her, I said, my voice firm. As we left the warehouse, the night felt different. The air felt lighter. The weight of the fight ahead clear, but not unbearable. The storm was coming, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for it. The days leading up to the HOA meeting felt like an eternity. The closer we got to the deadline, the more I could feel the pressure building, not just from Denise, but from the weight of everything we were about to expose. The entire system had been designed to silence people like us, and now we had the chance to bring it all crashing down. I spent every waking hour going through the files Ryan had gathered, running through the emails, the financial records, the board meeting minutes. Every page was another crack in the facade Denise had built. The more I saw, the more disgusted I became. She wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was a criminal using her position to funnel money out of our neighborhood while denying people access to emergency services. But as the meeting drew closer, I could sense something else in the air. It wasn't just the excitement of the fight ahead. It was the fear of what would happen when we pushed back. We weren't just fighting for our homes anymore. We were fighting for justice, and that was a dangerous thing to do. Ryan called me late one night, his voice tight with urgency. We're ready. I've got a few neighbors who are going to back us up. I'm sending the evidence to a few local journalists, too. If this goes public, it's going to hit the fan. I'm ready, I said, my heart pounding. But we need more. We need to make sure the board knows we're not backing down. We need the public on our side. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Yeah, we're going to need the whole neighborhood. If we don't have the community's support, this will fall apart before it even starts. I agreed. It was one thing to have the evidence, but we needed to make sure the board couldn't just sweep it under the rug. The people had to see what was happening. They had to know what their money was being used for and what kind of leader they had in Denise. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of the mirror, my hands shaking as I adjusted my tie. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, and I could feel the weight of everything we'd fought for pressing down on me. Today wasn't just about me and Ryan. It was about everyone who'd been too afraid to speak out before. Today, we were giving them a voice. I looked at my phone. A message from Ryan. It's time. I grabbed my jacket, feeling the cold leather against my skin. This was it. I walked out the door, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the neighborhood on my shoulders. I felt the support of everyone behind me. We weren't just fighting for our homes anymore. We were fighting for the truth. When I arrived at the clubhouse, the tension was palpable. Denise was sitting at the head of the table, her usual fake smile plastered on her face as she looked over the agenda. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine as I walked in, but she didn't say a word. She knew something was coming, but she didn't know how far we were willing to push. Ryan was already there, standing off to the side. He gave me a subtle nod as I walked up to him. His expression was focused, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. This wasn't just about exposing Denise anymore. This was about everything we stood to lose, everything the community stood to lose. I took my seat, and as the meeting began, the room felt smaller. There were murmurs, whispers, people looking at each other like they knew something was off. Denise called the meeting to order, but the usual bravado in her voice was gone. She could feel it too, the shift. The board members fidgeted, glancing at each other as they waited for her to speak. And then, without warning, I stood up. The room fell silent. "I'm not here to make empty complaints," I said, my voice steady but loud enough to cut through the tension. "I'm here to expose a criminal." Denise's eyes narrowed, but she didn't interrupt. I laid the folder on the table, slamming it down hard enough that the sound echoed. "This," I said, pointing at the stack of documents, "is everything you've been hiding. Every illegal fine, every financial transaction, every time you've manipulated this neighborhood for your own gain." Denise's face turned pale, but she kept her composure. "What are you talking about, Jack? You're making wild accusations." "No," I said, my voice rising. "I'm making facts. You've been tampering with the security system, blocking emergency access for residents when it suited you. You've been funneling HOA funds into your own pocket, and now you're trying to cover it up, but you can't hide from the truth." I could see her jaw tighten as she fought to maintain control, but the room wasn't on her side anymore. People were staring, some shocked, some angry. The truth had already started to settle in. Ryan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I've seen the records, I've seen the emails. Denise has been working with the security company to block emergency access for certain residents. She's been covering up her actions by erasing logs. And she's not just abusing power, she's stealing from this community." The board members shifted uncomfortably, some of them looking at Denise, others at the documents in front of us. It was all starting to crumble. I turned to the crowd, my eyes scanning the room. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone who's been hurt by this system. If we don't stand up now, it will keep happening. We have to take back control of this community. A few people stood, nodding. The murmur of agreement grew, and I could feel the momentum shifting. The room was no longer divided. We had the support we needed. Denise finally spoke, but her voice was no longer steady. "You can't do this, Jack. You don't have the power. I will make sure you regret this." I met her gaze, my voice unwavering. "You're the one who's about to regret it." The morning after the meeting felt like the first quiet after an explosion. People who'd been keeping to themselves were on porches, whispering, eyes sharp. Ryan and I decided to canvass, door to door, papers in hand, the evidence folded neat like a wound that needed tending. "Have you had trouble getting help?" I asked an elderly man on Cedar Lane, rain gluing his hair to his forehead. He read the emails, then his face went slack. "They fined my sister for a ramp," he said. "Said it wasn't approved. She's been struggling since." At the next house, a young dad balanced a baby on his hip and stared at the screen of a printed bank statement. "You sure?" he asked, voice low. "They've been charging us for repairs that never happened." He looked like a man seeing a map to a trap. By noon, a private thread was alive with people posting screenshots, receipts, photos of notices. Neighbors I'd never met messaged me, stories of fines, of denied access, of suspicious calls from the gate company. The tide was changing. We called the reporter Ryan had tipped. She arrived with a camera crew that made everything feel suddenly important. The tripod, the microphone catching every breath. I spoke to the camera, the words tasting like iron. "We have emails showing the board coordinated with security to deny access. We have log wipes and transfers into personal accounts." I laid the folder on a table, the lens zoomed in on names and numbers. Outside, people gathered, holding their own stacks of evidence. A woman started weeping softly as she read a notice that had cost her months of wages. A teenage neighbor shouted about being fined for a basketball hoop. Cameras rolled over faces set in anger and fear. The story moved faster than I expected. By early evening, the county inspector called Ryan and asked to review documents. A local attorney offered to look pro bono. The police opened a report after the reporter filed a tip. For the first time, the machinery we'd been battering against creaked and started to move. Denise reacted the way predators do. She posted an aggressive notice on the HOA portal declaring we'd defamed the board and that she'd retained counsel. The language was precise and cold. "We will pursue all legal remedies," it read. I felt the threat like a slap. Lawsuits designed to bleed people dry, to scare neighbors into silence. Still, the neighborhood held fast. That night, folks left candles on porches and gathered in small knots to talk strategy and share names. The soft candlelight made the street feel like a witness stand. The county investigator arrived with a badge and a measured voice. He took statements, logged receipts, and requested originals. "We'll need to interview Denise," he said. Hearing that felt like a promise. But momentum breeds resistance. Denise's counsel started sending letters demanding we cease and desist. Board members who'd been quiet now sent polite but icy emails threatening countersuits. Someone rasped that the HOA would file for restraining orders. I could smell the escalation, like the metallic hint before a storm. The reporter's camera had captured our faces. The files were in the inspector's hands. We had turned gossip into a record. People who'd been afraid were signing statements. The community had found a spine. That night, I stood by the broken gate, its twisted bars half buried in mud, the sound of distant sirens fading into the dark. Ryan rested a hand on my shoulder. "They opened a file," he said. "County's involved." I exhaled slow. The arc of what we'd started felt heavy and sudden. There was hope in the county's paperwork and the neighbors' names, but Denise had lawyers. She understood systems. She'd buy time, delay subpoenas, and drag this into exhaustion. We'd won something, but not the war. The cameras had rolled, the county had opened a file, and the community was rallied. Still, the smell of the coming fight was unmistakable, tighter, heavier, and far from over. The courtroom was packed. The air was thick with tension, a weight that pressed down on everything. The chairs, the tables, the eyes of the crowd that had gathered to watch. Ryan and I sat in the front row, surrounded by familiar faces. Our neighbors were here, the ones who had stood with us from the beginning, the ones who had seen the truth and weren't backing down. They were all here because of the promise we'd made to expose Denise. And that promise was about to be kept. Denise sat at the front, flanked by her high-priced attorneys, her hands clasped tightly together in front of her. Her cold, calculating eyes flicked over to me as I walked in. That same smug smile played across her lips, like she still believed she had the upper hand. But she didn't know what was coming. No one did. The judge called the session to order, his gavel ringing out across the room. It was like a cue. The moment we'd been waiting for was here. I stood when my name was called, my hands steady, the folder of evidence tight against my chest. I walked to the stand with a feeling that settled somewhere between fury and resolve. My heart pounded in my chest, but the weight of the truth pushed me forward. I wasn't just representing myself anymore. I was representing every person who had been silenced by this corrupt system, every person who had suffered under Denise's manipulation. "Mr. Parker," the judge said, his voice calm, "please present your evidence." I nodded, holding the folder up. "This," I began, "is a compilation of evidence showing that Denise Green and the board of the HOA have been actively manipulating the security system and funneling HOA fines into personal accounts. These aren't just minor infractions, these are criminal activities, and the proof is in these records." I turned to the table, flipping open the folder. The first page I presented was an email thread between Denise and the security company, instructing them to block emergency access to specific homes. The room grew still as the judge examined the document, his eyes scanning the text. "Do you recognize these emails, Mrs. Green?" the judge asked, his gaze now fixed on Denise. Her jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Her attorney whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. I continued, flipping through the papers. "These are the financial records that show the funneling of HOA fees into personal accounts. It's clear. This money was being used for personal gain, not for the community." The judge leaned forward, his expression growing more serious with every word. Denise's lawyers didn't make a sound. They had no defense. The evidence was overwhelming. "Do you have anything to say, Mrs. Green?" the judge asked. For the first time, Denise's confidence cracked. She stood up, but her voice faltered. "These documents are fabricated," she said, her tone sharp but uncertain. "They're lies, meant to discredit me. I've dedicated my life to this community, and this is a personal attack." I shook my head, keeping my voice steady. "This isn't personal, Denise. This is about what's right. It's about the truth. You manipulated every single person in this neighborhood. You put your own interests above the safety and well-being of others. You used this HOA as a weapon, and now you're getting exposed for it." The room was silent for a moment. I could hear the soft rustling of papers as the judge continued to review the evidence. The weight of what was happening was settling over everyone. The truth was out. Denise had no escape. And then, just as the judge was about to speak, one of our neighbors stood up in the back of the room. "I've got a statement," the neighbor said, his voice shaking but firm. "I'm here to tell you about the day my wife couldn't get her medication because the gate wouldn't open. I'm here to tell you how we waited, and nobody came to help. I'm here because she was locked out of the only place that could save her." "Denise, you did that?" The room went completely still. The weight of the words hit everyone like a punch to the gut. Denise's face drained of color. She looked around as if she could find a way to make it all go away. But there was no escape. The neighbor continued. "I didn't want to say anything before. I thought it was just a mistake. But this isn't a mistake. This is murder in slow motion. You blocked people from getting help, and we've had enough." I could feel the shift in the room. People were standing now, murmuring in agreement. The judge didn't need to say anything. The impact of that statement was enough. The truth was loud and clear, and it wasn't going away. Denise sank back into her seat, her gaze cold. But it was clear that she knew the game was up. She had no answer. No more lies to tell. "Mr. Parker," the judge said, his voice strong, "I think we have enough to move forward." Denise's attorney opened his mouth, but the judge held up a hand. "No more excuses. We'll adjourn until tomorrow for sentencing." And just like that, the battle was over. Denise was cornered. The truth had shattered her empire. The community had found its voice, and justice was within reach. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of everything I'd fought for lift off my shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but we'd taken the first step toward taking our neighborhood back. The courtroom doors swung open, and the weight of what had just happened settled over me like a blanket. My legs were stiff from standing for so long, my hands still trembling from the adrenaline that hadn't quite worn off. But as I stepped out into the hallway, the buzz of voices, the shuffle of papers, the distant sound of the judge's gavel, it all felt like a distant echo now. The fight wasn't just mine anymore. I looked around, meeting the eyes of the people who had stood with us, who had given everything to see this day come to life. Ryan was by my side, his face tight with a mix of relief and disbelief. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "We actually did it." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. The enormity of what had just happened was too much to process. The evidence was overwhelming, the support of the neighbors undeniable, and now it was all in the hands of the judge. Denise's empire was crumbling. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was clear now that she couldn't hide from the truth. But there was something else hanging in the air, something heavy, like the quiet before a storm. As we walked through the courthouse lobby, I felt the eyes on us, the whispers, the disbelief. People were talking about what had happened, about the lies we'd exposed, about the woman who had controlled the neighborhood with an iron fist for so long. And then, as I stepped outside into the fading daylight, it hit me. This wasn't just about Denise anymore. This was about the entire community, about the families who'd been manipulated, about the neighbors who'd been too scared to speak out, about the people who had been silenced by a corrupt system, afraid of losing their homes, their livelihoods. But now we had taken back control. Ryan stopped beside me, glancing over at the small group of neighbors who had gathered outside the courthouse. They were holding their heads a little higher now, their expressions no longer full of fear, but of hope. The community was coming together, stronger than before. One of the neighbors, a deep single mother with 2 kids, stepped forward. "I don't know how to thank you, Jack," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given us a chance to breathe again, to fight for our homes. We can't let her keep doing this." I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was a smile of solidarity. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "This was never just my fight. It's all of ours. We've all got a part to play in fixing this." Ryan nodded, stepping forward with a raised hand. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're not backing down. Not now, not ever. The crowd began to murmur in agreement, the energy shifting from anger to determination. They weren't just spectators anymore. They were participants in the future we were all about to build together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we could win. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the courthouse steps felt like the beginning of something new. It wasn't over, but the foundation had been laid. The truth had been exposed. The community had been heard. And now, Denise was facing the consequences of her actions. The next day, the judge handed down his ruling. Denise was removed from her position as HOA president, and the board was disbanded. The evidence was too much to ignore. The charges were clear. Her manipulation of the security system, the funneling of funds into personal accounts, it was all criminal. And now she would pay for it. But as much as that felt like a victory, it was the community that had truly won. They'd found their voice. They'd taken a stand. And now they were going to rebuild together. The next weeks were full of meetings, hearings, and legal wrangling. But the mood in the neighborhood was different. People were speaking to each other more, organizing to hold new elections for the HOA, putting in place safeguards to ensure something like this could never happen again. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I sat on my porch that evening, the same one where I'd spent countless hours worrying about the future of my family. The front door creaked open, and Ryan came out, holding a beer in each hand. "Don't mind me," he said with a grin. "Just thought I'd join the guy who saved us all." I took the beer, nodding toward the street, where the kids were riding bikes and neighbors were talking in the yard. The air felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted from everyone's shoulders. "Feels like we actually live here now," I said quietly. Ryan laughed, clinking his bottle against mine. "Yeah, it really does. It's strange how quickly things can change. One moment, I was staring down at the papers, the emails, the lies that had held us captive for so long. And the next, I was standing on the other side of it, looking out at a neighborhood that was finally free. The day Denise was officially removed from her position as HOA president, the sun seemed a little brighter. The streets that had once felt like a prison of rules and restrictions were now filled with people talking, laughing, making plans. The weight that had hung over this community for years, crushing everything beneath it, was finally gone. But it wasn't just about her removal. It was about the fight we'd fought together, the people who had come forward, the voices that had been silenced for so long. We'd all been part of something bigger than any one of us, a movement that couldn't be undone. I walked down the street that evening, past houses I'd lived next to for years, but never really knew. Faces turned toward me, and there was a quiet nod of recognition. The people who had once kept to themselves were now part of something that felt alive, something hopeful. I stopped in front of my house and looked around. The porch was the same, but it felt different now. The air was filled with the sound of children playing, of neighbors talking over fences, of the kind of life I'd once taken for granted. It was all here, the community, the connection, everything I thought had been lost. It wasn't just my family that had won. It was all of us. Ryan came walking up to me, holding a couple of beers. "Thought you might want one of these," he said with a grin. I took the bottle, the coolness of it, a welcome relief after the heat of the day. "You know," I said, looking around at the neighborhood, "I didn't think it was going to happen like this. Not after all the fighting, the sleepless nights. But here we are." Ryan laughed, his voice light. "Yeah. Feels like we're starting over, doesn't it?" I nodded, taking a long swig from the bottle. I never thought I'd see the day when we could actually breathe again. We both stood there for a moment, the sound of children's laughter in the distance, the soft rustle of trees in the wind. For the first time in years, it felt like peace. I turned to him, my voice quiet. "It was worth it, right? All the risk, all the fights." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Hell yeah. Look around, Jack. This is what we fought for. We didn't just stop Denise. We changed the way things work around here. We took it back." A few neighbors passed by, nodding and waving. One of the kids kicked a soccer ball toward us, and Ryan caught it with a practiced motion before tossing it back. It was small moments like that, simple exchanges, that showed just how much had changed. This was more than a victory. It was a rebirth. Denise's defeat hadn't just cleared the way for change, it had reminded everyone of their power, of their ability to speak up. to take action. The new HOA board was being elected soon, and the conversations happening around the neighborhood weren't just about who would take the lead, but how things would be different this time. The board wouldn't control the people anymore. The people would control the board. I couldn't help but smile as I leaned back against the porch railing, looking at the neighborhood around me. The fight was over, but the journey, it was just beginning. "You think we'll be okay?" I asked quietly, turning to Ryan. He smiled, clinking his bottle against mine. "I think we're more than okay. We're home." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The end of the fight wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter for everyone involved. We'd taken back what was rightfully ours, and together we'd built something stronger, something that couldn't be taken away.